The problem got worse until I finally spotted some fine webbing on one of the stems. I looked it up and went down a spider mite rabbit hole on the internet. I don't mind admitting that I have made countless mistakes when caring for my houseplants, and I've lost a fair few plants along the way, but I've been able to learn from these mistakes to improve my houseplant care to now share my experiences with you on this channel. So let me share with you 5 of the best beginner houseplant tips that I wish I knew earlier so that you can avoid some of the costly mistakes I made when I was just starting out on my indoor jungle journey. One of the biggest mistakes I made when bringing home plants from the nursery or big box store was placing them amongst my other houseplants straight away. This is a huge mistake and can be very costly for your existing plant collection. Why? Well, because you have no idea what is on the plant you have brought home. That plant could be infested with spider mites, and the one thing you should know about spider mites is that the population grows rapidly and they love spreading from plant to plant. Nestling in your new spider mite infested plant amongst your beloved plants in your home will lead to disaster, with spider mites spreading to all of your plants. You would now have a big problem on your hands because dealing with a spider mite problem on one plant is much easier than dealing with a problem on your entire plant collection. So what's the solution? To quarantine your plant. Now this may sound a bit silly, but it really pays off when you bring your plant home to keep it separate from any of your plants for at least a couple of weeks until you are satisfied that there are no bugs on the new plant. You can then integrate it amongst your plant collection. During these 2 weeks, you want to be periodically checking the stems and leaves and soil for any signs of mites, mealybugs, thrips or fungus gnats. They are the plant pest big hitters. If you spot something, then deal with the problem. Quarantine the plant for a further 2 weeks and then integrate. I bought a croton from my local nursery a few years ago that immediately deteriorated when I brought it home, and I didn't understand why. The leaves kept falling off the plant, so I assumed it was a watering problem. The problem got worse until I finally spotted some fine webbing on one of the stems. I looked it up and went down a spider mite rabbit hole on the internet. Unfortunately, by this time, the plant was pretty much dead, so I had to throw it out. Luckily enough, the problem hadn't spread to my other plants because the plant wasn't that close to my other plants. It was clear to me that I had bought a plant with spider mites on it at the time of purchase. So always do your checks and keep the new plant away from your collection until you know it's free of bugs. You'd really be surprised at how many of the plants in the shops are infested with all these sorts of bugs. The next tip I wish I knew earlier is the importance of good soil composition. Good soil composition can make or break the health of your plant. It can make the difference between a plant with dull foliage with little growth to one that has vibrant leaves with lots of fresh new growth. When I started out buying houseplants, I didn't really understand how soil of our plants changes over time. I just assumed that once we pot our plant up into some soil, that same soil is good forever. This is the incorrect way to think about plant soil though. Over time, as we water and fertilise our plants, the soil the plant lives in compacts more and more until the plant is living in tightly compacted soil with little oxygen available for the roots of the plant. This is seriously detrimental to the plant and leads to stunted growth. Plants need a nice aerated soil mix to allow the roots to breathe and take up nutrients that then feed strong growth. To achieve this, we first need to make sure we use a free draining potting mix consisting of potting soil with something added for drainage, such as perlite or grit. So I use about 5 parts compost to 2 parts perlite for my mix, and my plants love it. We then need to make sure we change the soil of our plants once a year to remove old compact soil and replace with a nice fresh soil mix. This will give the plant a boost because we are changing the soil for one that is fresh in nutrients and that has good microbial activity. So when I was starting out buying plants, I wouldn't change the soil of my plants at all, and it tended to look a bit dull and weren't growing as much as I wanted. So I wish I knew the importance of this tip then. The next tip is something I really wish I knew much earlier, and probably something my plants wish I knew sooner too, and that is pruning your houseplant will not harm it in any way. The truth is that pruning your plants is one of the best things you can do for your plants, and a really important habit to get into if you want to have healthy looking plants. If you think that cutting the stem of your philodendron will kill that stem, then you are thankfully mistaken. Cutting the stem of your plant will normally result in 2 new stems growing where you made the cut. This encourages the plant to really push out with lush new growth. Pruning is the secret to having really bushy plants, and it's the way YouTubers like Plantarina have those gorgeous looking bushy plants in her videos. I regularly cut my ficus plants to get them to branch out into multiple stems to achieve a tree-like structure that I prefer with these plants. Vining plants such as philodendrons and pothos respond in the same way. I regularly take cuttings of these plants and new shoots always regrow where I made the cuts. I've had my large Monstera deliciosa for years, and when I first had it, I feared pruning it because I didn't want to kill my beloved plants. I'm now not as fearful as I was about cutting back parts of the plant that need to be cut. I wish someone would have told me that pruning is actually good for the plant and is to be encouraged. I've made countless mistakes with my plants, from improper watering technique to not putting them in the right light conditions, and most of those mistakes stemmed from me not knowing anything about the plants I was caring for. Now this is a lazy mistake I wish I had learned from long ago. It would have saved a fair few plants in the process. Plants have differing care requirements, and if we don't know the care requirement for a specific plant, how can we expect to look after it correctly and for it to flourish in our care? An Echeveria, for example, will have wildly different care requirements to a Philodendron Brazil. Echeverias are succulents that need full sun and very little water to flourish, whereas a Brazil will only tolerate indirect sunlight and will need a little more water. If we're ignorant to these requirements and treat these plants in the same way, at least one of them will start to suffer. So basically, do your research. Whenever I buy a new plant, I always quickly Google the plant when I bring it home to give me an overview of what the plant likes. Now I don't go mad and spend hours researching the plant. I just read a quick guide to give me a general idea of what it likes, and that tends to suffice. If you don't know what the plant is because you bought it a little while ago, then use Google Lens to easily identify the plant and then go on from there. The next tip that I wish I knew sooner is probably my favourite houseplant care tip, and I only started doing it a couple of years ago, but since I implemented it, I've seen a marked improvement in the health of my plants, and that is to bottom water houseplants. Bottom watering is great for the roots of your plants. Your plant's roots will be encouraged to grow down towards the bottom of the pot where the moisture is, rather than searching for it near the crown of the plant, strangling the plant in the process. The plant will wick up the moisture through the drainage holes in the plastic nursery pot, and this ensures a nice even watering of your plant. If you top water your plant, there is a risk that you don't saturate all the soil in the pot, and you can easily miss spots. Bottom watering avoids this because the soil is moistened through wick action. Bottom watering is also great at preventing fungus gnats getting a hold of your plants. Fungus gnats like a wet top 2 inches of soil to lay their eggs, and when we bottom water we can control how dry the top of the soil is, thereby making it far less hospitable for fungus gnats. It's also pretty difficult to overwater our plants with bottom watering because the plant will draw up the moisture it needs rather than having water constantly poured over the soil of the plant. It's also great at preventing compaction in the soil, since the plant wicks up the moisture rather than the water being poured over the plant from the top, compacting the soil over time. If you want to know how to double your plant collection in 1 month for free to grow your own indoor jungle, then make sure you click on the link here for 4 great tips on how to do just that.